Good afternoon. This is Jesse Carbonda, the Executive Director of the Hoosier Environmental Council. I really appreciate you joining us for the third in a series of webinars about the 2013 Indiana General Assembly. This webinar is going to be focused on controversial factory farm legislation. And before we dive into the presentation, I just want to note that HEC is, without question, not anti-agriculture. We are actually very interested in promoting a vibrant agricultural system in Indiana, but the question is one that is also environmentally sensitive and treats animals with humanity, and certainly is one that is good for all different types of farmers' sizes. Our Twitter hashtag, how you can pose questions to us. Once again, our webinar is going to be on Friday, April the 26th at 12 p.m. Eastern, and you can write us questions after this webinar at comments@hecweb.org. I'll now turn this over to our Water and Agricultural Policy Director, Kim Ferraro.
Happy Friday, everyone. As Jesse mentioned, we're going to be talking about some specific legislative initiatives in 2013 that directly deal with industrial livestock production. But before I get into the focus of the conversation, I did want to talk about the status of some of the prior bills and resolutions that had been proposed this session, which have been I don't know if I could say defeated, but with lots of good public input and involvement from folks like you who have called their legislators, they have not been given a hearing or otherwise dead this session. So I wanted to give you an update on those. The first two are constitutional amendments. They're companion resolutions, House Joint Resolution 5 and Senate Joint Resolution 21. Which would have made unconstitutional most laws that govern agricultural practices that are meant to protect the environment, public health, food safety, and property. Very similar to SJR 7, which I will be talking about in more detail in this presentation. The other one that has died this session is Senate Bill 571, which would have prevented injured landowners, folks who live next to large industrial livestock facilities who find that their quality of life has been devastated in some way or their property values plummeted from mismanagement of manure and odors from factory farms, would prevent them from seeking court relief by expanding the legal immunities afforded to factory farms under our existing right to farm statute. Senate Bill 571 also would have prevented local governments from enacting zoning ordinances and other measures to protect their citizens from conditions such as water pollution and air pollution and nuisances from industrial livestock facilities. It also would have allowed the livestock industry to legitimize some of its harmful industry practices by codifying those practices as regulations into law, regulations that then the industry would have to comply with. And then finally, three different bills that have not gone anywhere this session would have created a loser pay system, which would be, have been the only state in the United States with such a system that required the loser, a plaintiff who brought a lawsuit, for example, who was injured by an industrial livestock facility, if they lost their case, even if legitimate, they would have had to pay for the defendant's legal fees, including attorney's fees. So that would have the effect of deterring people who are poor, of modest means, from seeking relief from courts when they're harmed. So those are things to celebrate. What we're going to be talking about today are two very disturbing and controversial pieces of legislation that are still making their way through the State House, but I did, like I said, wanted to take a moment to at least celebrate that we've managed to at least stall for now some other also harmful policy initiatives that would have harmed Hoosiers. So I'm going to be talking this particular webinar about Senate Joint Resolution 7, We're referring to it as the right to harm as opposed to right to farm. It will enhance constitutional and legal protection for livestock factories, and we'll talk about that one in detail. And then also Senate Bill 373, which has been referred to as the Ag-Gag Bill, who at its core will punish whistleblowers who are concerned about animal well-being and welfare and other conditions, worker conditions on industrial facilities, including industrial livestock facilities, from taking pictures or videos at those operations. So let's start with Senate Joint Resolution 7. The first thing that's troubling about this, and I know that some of what I'm going to say I talked about during our last webinar, but I know that there are some of you on the call who may not have been able to attend the last webinar, and so this is for you, give you a little bit of background about what these two measures would do. So starting with SJR 7, the title of it is the right to hunt and fish, which sounds fairly benign, but then when you get into the text of the bill, you also see that it would create a constitutional right to engage in the agricultural or commercial production of meat, fish, poultry, or dairy products. Why is this concerning? Well, let's think about what it is creating a fundamental right to do. Most folks think about livestock being raised as it was in the earlier part of our century, or last century, where livestock are raised in open fields, on bucolic farms, in beautiful nature settings like you see here. But actually, 85% of our meat, poultry, and dairy products come from large factory farms or industrial facilities like these, where animals are confined, thousands of animals are confined indoors without access to sunlight or fresh air, where millions of gallons of manure are stored outdoors in open-air lagoons, where their emissions from the manure, such as hydrogen sulfide and particulate matter, can make living conditions unbearable for folks who live next door, where contaminants such as Ecoli and nutrients can seep into groundwater and our surface waters, and we know that this is happening because Ecoli is the number one cause of contamination of water quality in the state of Indiana. So also SJR 7, I think it's really critical to understand, would create a fundamental right not only for small sustainable farmers, the number of those small sustainable farmers that are dwindling, but also very large corporations like Tyson and JBS and Cargill, who really control most of the livestock that is raised in the United States. It gives them a constitutional right to do what they do. And there are, I think it's really critical to understand that most people are concerned about the very largest of these facilities, the ones known as CAFOs and CFOs, concentrated animal feeding operations, or confined feeding operations. But there are many of smaller facilities known as AFOs, animal feeding operations, which are not regulated because they don't meet the animal threshold number, but still do raise animals in confinement, still do store the liquid waste outdoors in open air lagoons, and also do contract through vertical integration with these very large corporations. So SJR 7 creates a fundamental right to engage in these industry practices in our state constitution. So protecting small sustainable farmers, but also very large corporations. And to bring this point home, I want to show you a really short clip that talks about the change in our industrial livestock production in the United States and how small and large farmers are brought into the system.
Tyson, for example, is the biggest meatpacking company in the history of the world. The industry changed the entire way the chicken are raised. Birds are now raised and slaughtered in half the time they were 50 years ago, but now they're twice as big. People like to eat white meat, So they redesigned the chicken to have large breasts. They not only changed the chicken, they changed the farmer. Today, chicken farmers no longer control their birds. A company like Tyson owns the birds from the day they're dropped off until the day that they're slaughtered.
So as you can see from that short video clip, traditional farming or traditional livestock ranching is been transformed into an industrial practice that practice would receive constitutional protection in the state constitution if SJR 7 becomes law. Here in Indiana, we know that 80% of the livestock produced is at these large factory farms. And the number of animals include 870,000 cows and calves, 5.5 million hogs and pigs, 42 million poultry birds. And as I stated before, confining this many animals in one place creates not only horrible living conditions for people who live nearby, but it has contaminated thousands of miles of our riverways, of our waterways, killed fish, and also destroyed land and soil productivity, and any number of problems that have been associated with this here in Indiana. So all of these practices, again, would receive constitutional protection under SJR 7. So I want to give you a little detail about why that is. Why amending our Constitution to create a fundamental right to produce meat, to commercially produce meat, provides such special protection. Well, the first thing is to understand the part of our Constitution that would be amended by SJR 7, and that's Article 1, where we find our fundamental rights to freedom of speech, freedom of religion, the right to vote, those rights that we think to be common across the human condition. So certainly the right to commercially produce meat doesn't seem to be equal to our other fundamental rights. So just as a sort of a concept of fundamental fairness, of equal rights, that's a problem. The other thing is that in Article 1, our right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness has been interpreted by case law to include the right to engage in whatever economic activity that's legal that we want to do. So that means we all have the right to work for whoever we want. We all have the right to own a business, a legal business. We have the right to pursue those things, meaning that industrial livestock producers already have the right to do what they do, just as other people have the same economic freedoms to pursue their own trades, professions, or industries. So elevating one above the other, again, creates a skewed system where industrial livestock producers have special protection. The other problem is that when a government tries to regulate a constitutionally protected activity, the burden in passing a law is significantly higher. To regulate a non-constitutionally protected activity, the government need only show a rational basis to do so, just some basis that serves the public interest. On the other hand, if the right is protected by the Constitution, like the freedom of speech, the government has to show that it hasn't materially burdened the right. And the material burden analysis doesn't care about whether or not the law serves the public interest. So it's much more difficult to pass a law against a constitutionally protected activity. What does this mean for our existing laws? Well, those existing laws were passed under the rational basis test. So if SJR 7 is allowed to amend our Constitution, existing laws such as items CAFO and CFO rules that protect soil health and water quality will be at risk for constitutional challenge, because they will now limit a constitutional right as opposed to a non-constitutionally protected right. We'll also see the state chemist fertilizer rules, which protect soil health and water quality, being put at risk. The Board of Animal Health regulations, which protect our food supply and animal welfare would also be at risk. The ability of local governments to pass zoning laws and land use laws to protect quality of life in our communities, those that govern facility siting, community planning, those laws could be at risk. And eminent domain, which is often used by governments to further economic development interests and economic development in rural communities, would be at risk as well. Concerning to folks who live next to industrial livestock facilities, their common law property rights would also be put at risk. So the ability to bring a lawsuit, as I talked about before, would be subject to a bigger hurdle, because a person who has property rights that lives next to an industrial livestock facility would have to overcome the burden that the industrial livestock facility is protected by the Constitution. Product liability laws that apply to agriculture could also be put at risk. So essentially, amending our Constitution in this way has really grave consequences for Hoosiers in the state's ability to protect them under this suite of regulations that we have. What can you do about it? Well, the first thing that you can do is understand that it's been assigned to the House Judiciary Committee after passing out of the Senate with wide margins. Representative Greg Steuerwald is the chair of that committee, and you can see here the other members of that committee. Certainly reaching out to them and voicing your concerns would go a long way towards making sure that this measure doesn't pass out of committee and then on to the voters. And one of the things that we're asking is, in addition to just not giving the measure a hearing at all, that if there is some inkling that they're going to pass it, to at least send it to a summer study committee so that folks with legal knowledge, with constitutional expertise, can take a look at the potential implications of passing such a serious measure. If you go to the General Assembly website, up on the left-hand corner of the screen, and there's the link for you. If you click on that, it'll take you to this page where you can enter your address and your zip code, and it'll take you to your legislator. No, that's fine. And so there you can send an email. There's also phone information so that you can contact your own legislator and voice your concerns, and we certainly urge all of you to do that. Okay, so now I want to talk about Senate Bill 373, which has received quite a bit of attention in the press, and understandably so, because it has some really serious consequences. This measure would amend our criminal trespass laws by making it a Class A misdemeanor for a person to knowingly or intentionally enter real property that's owned by another person without the other person's consent, with the intent to defame, then take a digital or analog photograph or make a video recording on the facility while on that real property. This specific provision here is brand new as of yesterday. That's a new amendment that amends a completely different part of the Indiana Code than what the initial Senate Bill 373 would have done. And it increases the penalty from a Class A infraction to this Class A misdemeanor, which would subject the person arrested under this particular provision to a year prison time and a $5,000 fine. The second piece of 373 also amends our employment fraud statute and would create a Class A misdemeanor, same penalty that I mentioned before, if a person with the intent to defame, directly or indirectly harm the business relationship between a prospective employer and the customers of that employer, to submit that application with by concealing a material fact or lying on the application. So that was already a law, but the language there that's highlighted is in addition to that. And what's concerning is when we get into what that means. What does it mean to defame or directly or indirectly harm a business relationship between a prospective employer and the customers of that employer. The main purpose of it with respect to industrial facilities like industrial livestock facilities is to protect this particular image here. Most folks, when they go to the grocery store, think of the happy farmer image there on the left, evidenced by the logo down below with Swift Premium. It shows the traditional farm setting. And so most folks think that that's where their meat is coming from when they go to the grocery store. So there are groups that have, like the Humane Society, like People for Ethical Treatment of Animals, other organizations that have gone undercover in industrial livestock facilities and taken photographs and videos to expose the truth, which dispels this myth. What they do is they take photos like these, photos that show perfectly legal practices, actually. These are common scenes inside industrial livestock facilities. Clearly not the bucolic farm setting that many people, many consumers think that their livestock comes from or that their poultry and dairy comes from. And so as a result of seeing photographs like these, folks might become vegetarian, or they might make different choices about buying from growers that they know treat their animals humanely. And so that's what they're getting at when we're talking about defaming the employer or trying to harm the business relationship between the employer and their consumer. It's really just revealing the truth about the legal practices that are going on at industrial livestock facilities. Again, photos like these that show common legal practices where baby chicks are discarded into dumpsters live because they no longer serve the economic interest of the egg industry. And because of photos like these, we know that in other states, policies have been changed, practices have been changed, and the fear is that folks here in Indiana might do the same if they were exposed to these sorts of videos. Photos about where our food comes from. Again, gestation crates for pigs. This is a common legal practice here in Indiana, but as a result of photographs like these and videos that I'll show you in a minute, 7 other states have banned these gestation crates. So although it's legal, and the argument from the other side is that, well, if someone's showing or taking a picture or a video of an illegal practice, they ought to be able to turn that over to law enforcement, and that's fine. That's not what we're worried about. But this is taking a picture of a legal practice. So there would be no protection for somebody who is trying to expose the truth, trying to help the public stay aware so that we can have that important policy discussion about where our food comes from. A video like this one. This is the one that, this is a video that I'm getting ready to show you that was taken by the Humane Society of the United States and led to the ban of gestation crates for pigs, in 7 other states.
What we found are extraordinarily inhumane conditions at Smithfield Foods, the largest pork producer in the entire world. I still remember the first time I ever laid eyes on a gestation crate facility, seeing the helplessness of these animals who have done nothing to deserve the fate that they're enduring. Suffering inside of these crates is just absolutely devastating. The Humane Society of the United States has investigated one of Smithfield's breeding operations. This facility represents what gestation crate confinement is. Open wounds, pressure sores, infections, bleeding gums from biting the bars so much, and these animals aren't even being cared for with individualized veterinary attention. Regardless of how the system is managed, these pigs are barely able to move even an inch their entire lives. They're unable to walk around, to turn around. It causes them to quite literally go insane. And this is one of the reasons why so many animal scientists and veterinarians have condemned this extreme confinement practice.
Smithfield, about, I would say, 3 weeks ago, made an announcement that we had made a decision to phase out the use of sow gestation crates in all of our company-owned farms over a 10-year period.
Smithfield committed publicly to phasing out gestation crates within a 10-year period, receiving a lot of public praise for doing so. Now, just a couple years later, the company is saying that it no longer can meet its own very generous self-imposed deadline. That's completely unacceptable. Many other pork companies, such as, let's say, Maxwell Foods, which is one of the biggest pork producers in the country, is already 100% gestation crate-free. Cargill, another major pork producer, is already 50% gestation crate-free. The American Farm Bureau, the primary agribusiness lobby in the United States, funded a poll in which they found that an overwhelming majority of Americans find gestation crates to be inhumane. This is one of the reasons why 7 states in the country have already banned this practice, why all 27 member nations of the EU have banned the practice. Gestation crates are a practice of the past, not of the future, and Smithfield ought to be speeding up that trend rather than slowing it down.
So back on track, and I know that video was disturbing for folks, including myself, and you can see that although that showed a completely legal practice, as a result of showing that video, 7 states have banned the use of gestation crates. Well, unfortunately, 373 would make that video a crime. It would subject the folks at the Humane Society who took that video to a $5,000 penalty and a year in jail. So I want to make the link for everyone on how SJR 7 and 373 is linked. SJR 7 would make what you saw in that video just now an activity that has constitutional protection under our state constitution. SB 373 would keep you from knowing about it. And so essentially shutting down the policy debate, the public debate that needs to happen continuously in order for the public to know, in order for us to protect our environment, to protect animals, to protect people in our communities. So both of these are very dangerous measures, and both are really getting at the same thing, which is to provide that very special legal protection and immunity for a very specific industry. Let me give you an update on where Senate Bill 373 has been. As I mentioned before, it passed out of the Senate in wide margin. It was assigned to the House Agricultural Committee, was given a hearing where there was just tremendous opposition. Lots of folks from public interest organizations, including the Hoosier Environmental Council, including press organizations, obviously the Humane Society and other animal welfare groups. But despite that opposition, it was amended and then passed yesterday out of committee by a vote of 9-3. So it's now on its way to a floor vote. And I know that all of you on the call are wanting to know what you can do. At a minimum, you need to reach out again to your representative. And you can do that, as I mentioned before, by going to the Indiana General Assembly website, clicking on the link to the left, typing in your address, and you'll find all the contact information that you need. What else can you do? Well, it's critical that a broad swath of the Indiana public understand what's going on here. This can't just be confined to groups, animal welfare groups, environmental groups, and the press. This has to receive some very broad attention. So in your community, if you can contact your local TV stations and radio stations, and alert them to what's going on, ask them to do a piece. If they've done one, thank them for doing it, ask them to do it again as an update, and of course write letters to the editor to your local paper, and also contact your paper, make sure to thank them for their past coverage, and to do additional stories. As I mentioned before, you should also contact your state representative, but going a step further than that, if you could actually make arrangements to meet with your representative face-to-face. You do that by setting up a meeting through their legislative assistant. All that information is available on the General Assembly website. Go meet with them face-to-face. Talk to them about your concerns. That could go a long way toward helping convince them to maybe change their vote. Another thing that you can do is use social media, use Facebook and Twitter and other means at your disposal to get the word out. And then finally, attending the floor vote itself can help raise public awareness about this measure. If you need some help with talking points and what to say, our Bill Watch page has everything that you need. I've put the link to it there. Actually, we could walk through it. Ryan, see if you can click to that. You're a little slow. Okay, so what you see is the Bill Watch page specifically related to ag and water quality. We've posted a video there that it's 2 minutes long. If you want to link that into your Facebook page or in an email and send it to someone, it succinctly describes everything that I've just said in 2 minutes. Sometimes pictures speak louder than words. There are, if you scroll down, Ryan, there's a fact sheet on Senate Joint Resolution 7. There's a full policy analysis for you to share and read so that you really understand in more detail what the implications are. There's a radio interview where I'm talking about these very issues. There's also an editorial. So lots of information there on SJR 7 that you can use to formulate your own messaging. If you go to, scroll down a little bit more. Yeah, there's information there as well on Senate Bill 373. There are links to there also to fact sheets and talking points. And if you go down to the Action Center, let's see. Oh, go back up, Action Center. Yeah. Oh, okay, well, you'll have to trust me. It works, but for some reason. Okay, that's all right. You know what? If you go to this page, for some reason our link is not working, but click on the Action Center and it'll take you to a link that helps you contact your legislator and also to some more talking points on Senate Bill 373. That's okay. Let's move on. Okay, and of course, go back one screen if you can. If none of that works, feel free to contact us at either comments@hecweb.org or you can contact me directly at kferraro@hecweb.org and I'll make sure to hook you up with whatever information you need. And now I'd like to open it up. We've got 15 minutes or so left for questions, and I know that I probably haven't covered everything that you'd like to know. Okay, so I have a question here. Sorry I missed the slideshow on how to respond to this. What are we supposed to do? Assuming that you're talking about Senate Bill 373, The main thing that you need to do is reach out to your legislator again, specifically your state representative first, and let them know your position on the bill, urge them to vote no. And also we're encouraging folks to contact media outlets in their local communities, radio, TV, and newspaper, write letters to the editor, and then of course go to our Bill Watch page where you can find additional information about talking points that you can use in your outreach.
Okay, I have a question here from Joseph Skelton, and he asks, if I'm on a country road and I see an illegal farming practice and take pictures from the road, will that be illegal?
Under Senate Joint Resolutions, under Senate Bill 373, it doesn't appear that it would be, but unfortunately the bill language is really not clear. So, if I were an attorney arguing for the other side, I might try to argue that it would be illegal. So, it's really subject to interpretation. We really don't know.
And then he follows up with that saying, what if he has permission from an adjacent owner's land and takes pictures? Would that be the similar situation?
Again, the bill language seems to suggest that it's going on to the property and taking the picture that would be the illegal act. But again, it's not really clear.
Okay. Elizabeth has a question that says, ask him, can you speak to the fox in the hen house? So many of these ag committee members have a dog in this fight relative to the fact that they are CAFO owners. How can we better bring this to light of the media?
Good question. We do know that there are seeming links between some of the legislators that have sponsored this bill to larger national organizations and that also own large factory farms themselves. And so to the extent that you're aware of those facts and you're aware of those links, you certainly should share them in your own outreach to media sources. But, be careful to make sure that you've got your facts straight about who legislators are associated with and what their interests might be.
Okay. Stacy has a question. What groups testified against the 373 at the committee hearing? So the bill, 373 bill.
To our knowledge, there were many groups that testified against. The Humane Society of the United States testified. The AFL-CIO testified. The Hoosier State Press Association testified. Many individuals. The Hoosier Environmental Council. There's a long, long list. Oh, and I should add to that we've heard from some legislators that they've received more calls about Senate Bill 373 than any other piece of legislation, I think including right to work last year.
Okay. And Barney asks, what kind of countermeasures is Smithfield taking? What does its PR function consist of? And are they willing to dialogue or are they approaching this confidentially?
I'm not sure I can answer that question. It seems that the reaction to positive progressive steps taken to address some of the worst practices at factory farms are being met with this sort of legislation that would provide extra legal protection for those harmful practices or silence whistleblowers instead of addressing the harms themselves. Do we have any other questions? Seriously, let's have a good dialogue. I know folks are really concerned about this, and many of you on the call have some great expertise that you might want to share as well. We'd be happy to share that with other people on the call.
Okay, Stacy asked a question, when is the floor vote?
We don't know yet, but make sure to log on to our Bill Watch page frequently, because we will announce that. We'll also announce it on Facebook. We'll announce it on Twitter. We'll send out an action alert. You can also go to the Indiana General Assembly website itself and check the calendar for the House. It'll announce the floor vote as well. But we'll do our best to keep everyone informed.
Okay. Mary has a question that says, have there actually been many false accusations from people taping or taking photos that has led to this bill being introduced in the first place?
Not to our knowledge. I know I've heard sponsors of this bill say that, but I am not aware of any evidence that anyone has produced that these videos have been doctored or somehow misrepresent what actually goes on.
Okay, and Fallon asks, can you guide people through how to look up the latest action amendments, et cetera, from how senators are voting and things like that, or how lawmakers are voting?
Sure. We can go on the Indiana General Assembly website page. Hang on just a minute.
Okay, and that website is, you can go to in.gov/legislative.
There is a, I think we can go there.
Oh, okay.
There we go. Great. So if you notice on the left-hand side, there's a long menu of all sorts of options. So you can go to the, where are you going with this? Why don't you walk it through since you were going to, here, Jesse, yeah, you're over there controlling things.
Okay, so once again, to get to the Indiana General Assembly website, you go to in.gov/legislative, and to look up the status on SB 373, the Ag-Gag bill, you go to Bill and Resolutions, you click on that on the left-hand side, then you click on Overview, and then here you have Go to Bill, and then you type in 373, click Go. And then there's a whole series of information you can see about this bill. You have at the top what's called the digest. And the digest is basically a summary of the bill, and it's often what legislators will read. And this is one of the big perils of legislating, because sometimes legislators will only read the summary part and not read any further, and oftentimes the devil's in the details. Now, to the question that was posed by one of our audience members, to learn about the status of the bill, you click on the action list, and you'll see a whole array of activities that have happened with the bill. And in fact, it turns out that this page has not been updated because, as Kim mentioned, this bill passed through the House Agricultural Committee yesterday on a vote of 9-2. 9-3. Now, so that's what the action list tells you. The next thing you'll see here is the introduced bill, and if you click on that, you will be able to see all the detail about the actual bill. Something else that will help you to keep your legislator accountable is if you look at the roll call. This will be especially important if, for example, your legislator votes for SB 373 when this bill gets voted on the Indiana House floor. And this page will get updated with that roll call vote, and you'll be able to see precisely where your legislator voted on.
Thanks for that great question. one thing I should point out is that it'll be updated as soon as the committee report is ready, and that's probably the delay since this just happened yesterday. Let's see, we're reading more questions.
Okay, Elizabeth asks, what is your guess on how this is going to go in the House vote?
Wow, if I only had tea leaves. You know, I think that in committee, it was assigned, this bill is assigned to that committee because there are sympathetic and friendly legislators, obviously, that wanted this bill to pass. So that was strategically assigned to that committee. But this, as you know, is a supermajority Republican-controlled House. But in our conversations with legislators on these bills, they do seem to be sympathetic when informed about the true implications of the bills. I mean, as Jesse pointed out, some of them only read the digest and don't really understand, the harmful impacts of what those bills are. And so specifically with respect to Senate Joint Resolution 7, many of the legislators I spoke with really had no idea what the constitutional and legal implications would be. So I think educating to the extent that you can your own representatives is key, and of course voting or letting them know, educating them on your position is also key. And we know that just a few calls can go a long way. So although I can't predict how it's going to go, I can say that your reaching out will make a difference.
Okay. Eric has a question. Have poultry and meat companies noticed a decline in business? Sorry, just a second. Yeah. Noticed a decline in business, and how are they able to pinpoint a correlation with candid videos?
I don't have an answer to that one. All I can say, I can give you a personal story that I was raised in Texas. I'm a meat eater, love it. But when I was first confronted with a video, this was 8 years ago, I made the decision to be vegetarian because of what I saw. And so I have no doubt that that is the same for many other people. Some may be on this call. And I think to that end, that's what SB 373 is trying to prevent.
Okay. Nancy asks, are there any tips or bait to get the media engaged to cover this?
Tips or bait? Well, I think being factually correct is key. To know what you're talking about is key. To point out specifically with respect to 373 that it also will limit information that the press will know about in order to be able to cover important stories like this, may be a tip that they might be interested in. I know that some media outlets that I've spoken to on the constitutional amendment, they were particularly interested in the constitutional and legal implications as opposed to, the specific concern about factory farming. So trying to show the broader implications of these sometimes works instead of just, focusing on your particular concern.
Okay. And Douglas asks, can we see who on committee voted how?
Yes, on the Indiana General Assembly website where Jesse was pointing out earlier, when you get to, there's a link to an action list, and then there's also a link to roll call. And so if you click on those links, it'll show you how they voted. And Jesse's writing out for me. Hang on. In committee, it was Representative Klinker, Representative Bauer, and Representative Niezgotsky that voted no.
Okay. And Joel asks, the amended bill as of yesterday isn't posted online. Is there anywhere to see it? Because I slipped through some big changes.
It will be posted today, we presume. Maybe not today, it might be tomorrow. They've got to do their committee report first. If you specifically would like it, I do have a copy, and we're going to post it up on our website. So check back with us this afternoon. And you're right, they did put in some very big changes.
Okay, Matthew asks, in regard to SJR 7, has there been any effort to get small farmers engaged in this discussion? And if so, what is the general perception of the amendment among that community?
That's a really great question. Short answer, yes. We work oftentimes with small, sustainable farmers here in Indiana in our efforts to push for policies that would allow them to do what they do on a broader scale. And it's our understanding that they are really against this, that they don't see that they need any sort of special constitutional protection, and that really this would make it more difficult for them than it already is to raise livestock sustainably. We have just a few minutes for a few more questions. Good point. While we're waiting for some more questions, with respect to what you could ask of your representatives on Senate Joint Resolution 7, specifically the study or the committee members, the House Judiciary committee members, we are really pushing for them to send SJR 7 for summer study, to a summer study committee, so that constitutional scholars, legal scholars, people that really understand this stuff can take a hard look at the implications of amending our Constitution in that way. So we hope that you will ask the same in your own conversations with your representatives. You know, going back to a question that somebody raised before about sort of a nice talking point with media, you might want to point out that there has been some pretty significant media coverage already, but that we need more, and to share some of the articles that have already been written with your local press, and they might want to pick up on it simply because other outlets are doing it too. Looks like we got about one more minute.
In our final couple minutes here, I did want to bring to your attention, obviously, that the Hoosier Environmental Council and many of our partners are working on other legislation in the final month of the 2013 Indiana General Assembly. One of them that we're carefully monitoring and are actively involved in has to do with the public transit funding bill. That bill has been passed through the Indiana House. That's HB 1011. It was also passed out of the Indiana Senate Local Government Committee, and now it's heading to the Indiana Senate Fiscal Policy Committee. We expect that to be a difficult vote. That committee hearing will be next Tuesday at 8 a.m. And obviously, we will be informing our supporters both through Facebook and Twitter. Our Facebook page, for those who don't know, is facebook.com/HECWeb, and then our Twitter handle is HEC_ED, and from those two ways you can find out about developments related to transit and, of course, all the other pieces of legislation that we are following, including SB 560, the very controversial energy policy bill. And once again, our next webinar is going to be on Friday, April the 26th at 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And we'd very much appreciate any comments you might have about how we could be more helpful in terms of how we organize our webinars. And you can certainly feel free to reach us at comments@hecweb.org. And again, if you've got questions for Kim that weren't posed here, or again, if you've got some constructive feedback for us in terms of how we can structure our webinars in a way that's more effective and helpful to you, that's obviously why we're here. So with that, we'll just wrap up. I'll again thank Kim Ferraro, our Water and Agricultural Policy Director and Staff Attorney, and Ryan McCracken, who's handling our technical facilities here for our webinar, and Tim Maloney, our Senior Policy Director, helping us out on Twitter. So once again, thanks very much. This is Jesse Carbanda, and if you have any questions for us, one more time, it's comments@hecweb.org. Thanks very much. Have a great Easter weekend.